Hi, hello. As PJ mentioned, he's disappeared now. My name is Kylie Stradley, and I love pizza, and I didn't need to include this image, but this is me tossing pizza. I love pizza so much. This is my profile picture on my company's website. If you go to bignerdranch.com/aboutusthenerds, this is my nerd picture. And I'm very excited to be here today. This is a very beautiful, well-organized, thoughtful conference. Everything I've ever wanted has been here. But I'm not here to talk to you about me today. I'm here to talk to you about someone who's very precious to me from my childhood. And you can tell she's precious to me because I've wrapped her in the one ring inscribed by Sauron in Mount Doom. And her name is Amelia Bedelia, and she was a very important character to me when I was a child. Before I get ahead of myself, though, can I see a quick show of hands from the audience? Are there any current or former children? If at any point in your life you were a child, could you raise your hand? Okay. I hear some laughing, but I'll have you know not everyone raised their hand. So for those of you who were not children, like many of us were, for a minute, suspend the disbelief and meet Amelia Bedelia. Amelia Bedelia, like I mentioned before, is a children's storybook character in America. And the stories are very popular in America, and they're very popular with children, because Amelia Bedelia, like children, is very literal, and she's very hardworking, and she just wants to do the right thing. So we use these stories to teach children about idioms. Idioms are figures of speech that are more than a sum of their parts. And when you're first learning any new language, like English or Portuguese or Ruby, you encounter a lot of idioms that don't have meaning to you because you try to derive their meaning from the sum of their parts. But the greater is actually whole than that. For example, in English, a common idiom is take a hike. And take a hike, when you listen to it literally, it sounds like, hey, why don't you go hiking? But that's not really what it means. You don't really care if someone takes a hike. You just want them to get out or go away. You don't care if they do it in the mountains or on a hill or while they're camping. All that matters is that they go away. So we use Amelia Bedelia to teach idioms like these to children. And like I mentioned before, Amelia Bedelia always tries her best. In this particular story called Merry Christmas, Amelia Bedelia, and the picture's not great, but Amelia is charged with making a date cake, and Amelia doesn't really know about the fruit dates, which are similar to raisins, and so the only dates that she can think of are calendar dates. So she cuts up a calendar and she mixes those dates into the cake batter and bakes the cake, and at the end of the story, everyone's really enjoying eating the date cake, which is strange to me, but I'm sure at the time it was written, it made sense. So she just tries her best with whatever she has. And sometimes she doesn't have all the information. Does this sound familiar at all? Someone who isn't familiar with the idioms of the language, doesn't have quite all the resources to get everything right the first time, but they try the absolute hardest? Yeah, I think Amelia Bedelia sounds like a beginner developer. I'm really fortunate in Atlanta, in the community where I live. I get to work with a lot of beginner developers, and I feel like those characteristics really embody the things that they care about. Working hard and doing a good job and learning, even if they don't have the best resources. Sorry, I'm very nervous. Can you tell? Is it quite obvious I'm nervous? I'm thinking, though, maybe a better way for me to teach you about Amelia Bedelia and learning idioms and learning a new language would be, instead of just telling you about it, maybe I could redo one of my favorite Amelia Bedelia stories. Would that be all right? Yeah, acceptable? The name of the story is Amelia Bedelia Learns to Code, written by Kylie Stradley, illustrations by Sam Smith, and inspired by the works of Peggy and Herman Parrish. A lot of pages in here. Amelia Bedelia is speaking with her employers The Rogers family. It's time for annual review. Mr. Rogers says, Amelia, you've always done good work, once we managed to get on the same page. We definitely appreciate your unique approaches to problem solving, but you're so literal, it drives me insane. It's like talking to a robot, or a computer. Talking to a computer, Amelia thinks. Now that sounds like fun. Hey, where are you going? Don't you want to know what your raise will be? Shouts Mr. Rogers. Amelia doesn't hear him. All she can think about is how much fun it will be to talk to computers. And so she's talking to the computer. She's saying hi in binary. In case you don't have binary memorized, which I'm sure is no one. I'm sure everyone has it memorized. Amelia reads that to talk to a computer, you have to speak their language. But it looks like there are quite a few languages you can use to talk to them. Amelia's new friends, some Rails girls, mentioned she might like a language called Ruby. Amelia thinks that sounds nice enough, but why Ruby specifically? Why Ruby? Why not Ruby? Shout two strange foxes who have mysteriously appeared. Ruby has elegant syntax. It's natural to read and easy to write, they follow up. If you like Ruby, you'll love Ruby on Rails. It's a web framework that's optimized for developer enjoyment. Rails lets you write beautiful code by favoring convention over configuration. Yeah, what he said, convention over configuration. An easy way to talk to the computer that's designed with developer happiness in mind? If being a developer is what it takes to talk to computers, I certainly want to be happy while I do it. Ruby it is, Amelia says to no one in particular, as the foxes have already disappeared in the same mysterious way that they arrived. These are Wise foxes from Wise Poignant Guide to Ruby, which you should also read, which I will read to you if you want, another time. This Ruby on Rails stuff is easy, Amelia thinks. It's got HTML and CSS. I know how to use those. There's a database. I've worked with databases before, too. Amelia's working her way through a beginner Rails project when she realizes that she needs to add a table to her database. Looks like the schema file is a central resource for the state of the database. For those of you who weren't children, a lot of times when children's books are read, sometimes there's like an audience participation part, and we're coming up on that. But I think you'll catch on just fine. So this we it. So what does Amelia do? We'll get the next one, though. She edits the schema, of course. Now she has another table in her database without involving those strange, randomly numbered migrations. Oh no, Amelia, I can't read this at all, exclaims Amelia's computer. In some languages or frameworks, you can edit the database schema directly to make changes to the database, but in Rails, the schema is just a representation of the state. The migrations seem to be randomly numbered, but those numbers at the beginning of the file are actually the date time that the migration was created. What a silly mistake. I won't do something like that again. I'll remember to write migrations when I want to update the database, and I'll remember to run them using rig so that they'll update my schema file. Amelia is cheerfully working on a brand new application, totally independent of tutorials and guides. She's not exactly sure what all this application needs, but she knows she can cover most things using the Rails generator to scaffold new models, views, and controllers quickly. Okay, so this is it. Are you ready? Excellent. She uses the scaffold for everything, of course. I'll just use the Rails scaffold to create my new model. That's just as easy as writing the files by hand myself. In fact, it's even easier. Plus, now I already have all the controllers and views pre-made, in case I need them later. I can just delete them if I decide I won't need them. And you can see her specification is for a doghouse, but she's using the scaffold, so she's inadvertently created this dog mansion. Amelia, do we really need all of this? Asks Amelia's computer. The Rails scaffold is handy, but you don't have to use it to create everything. You can use the generator to just generate a model, view, or controller. You can even just create new files without even using the generator, and Rails' convention over configuration design will make sure things match up how they should. But it's so much easier this way, says Amelia. Easier for you, maybe, replies Amelia's computer. I still have to load all of the assets created by the scaffold. Plus, do we need all of these scripts? I thought you just needed a model. You're right. We don't need all of this stuff. I didn't realize it added a lot of extra work for you. I'll be sure when I use the scaffold to only use the parts I really need. Okay, so I don't need to use the Rails generator to make everything. I can just create the files myself. Amelia remembers what the foxes told her, that Rails is designed with convention over configuration. I want to write the best code that I can. I'll follow the framework convention and write good code the Rails way. We haven't. You don't know why it's funny yet. I haven't read it to you. In each of her new files, she mimics the code and style generated by the scaffold. If this is how DHH would write Rails, this is how I'll do it too. Now you can laugh about it. Okay, that's it. Perfect. We'll work on that too. Oh no, Amelia, exclaims Amelia's computer. Convention over configuration doesn't mean that you have to use Rails only within the framework's conventions. It just means that you don't have to configure the connections between conventionally named models, controllers, and views. When you include all that code, you can accidentally include different features. For instance, leaving the to respond with blocks in the controller would allow you to inadvertently expose a JSON endpoint for that controller. So that's what that means, says Amelia. I definitely don't want to expose a JSON idea in this application. Just because I can do something with Rails doesn't mean that I should. I should only include those things when I need them, not just hold on to them for later. You got it, Amelia. Amelia is having a lot of fun at her first hackathon. The team she is working with is requesting a ton of features, many of them directed to different routes. Amelia's new teammates are excited, but they're getting antsy for the new web views for their app. Are we ready? She activates the routes by raking them each time before committing and pushing her code. With each new route she writes, she writes a new HTML file, adds the route to the route RB, and rakes the route. Rake is shorthand for Ruby make. So I rake each new route, and it will be available in my web views. I'm not going to make the same mistake I made with migrations and forget to rake my routes, expecting them to be there anyways. Oh no, Amelia. You don't have to rake the routes to activate them for your application. Rake just shows you a preview of what the routes will look like in a URL. Why not? Asks Amelia. I have to rake the migrations. It makes sense that I need to rake the routes, too. Amelia's computer explains, it is a little confusing that Rake creates your database migrations, but you don't need it to create routes. Rake is just a tool that runs tasks. The routes are created when you add them to the route RB. There's no harm in raking the routes, but it's not needed either. Oh, I think I'm getting it a little bit now. Rake is a tool, and it can run a lot of different tasks. Unlike the schema, routes aren't generated. I wrote them myself, so they exist as soon as I write them, explains Amelia. You're really starting to get this stuff, says Amelia's computer. Amelia is writing an application with her out-of-town friends, Fred and Carrie. Fred and Carrie have been developers for a while and are always hip to the latest trends and Ruby gems. Fred and Carrie say, gems are great. They're just libraries of code. Why write it yourself when you can just put a gem in it? Can you see where this is headed? Anyone? You can find a gem for everything. It's like you never have to write code yourself. Amelia thinks, these gems are pretty handy. It seems like I can just drop them wherever I want and have access to a ton of code written by someone else. What could go wrong? Amelia adds all of her favorite gems to each new project she starts. I'll save myself some time and some code. Carrie and Fred say, put a gem on it. You know what this app is missing? Gems. Let's spruce it up. Make it pretty with the Draper gem. What a sad little application. I know, I'll put the Rails admin gem on it. That's not a joke. Everyone laughs at that. That's not the funny part. Did you see this application before? I didn't. Not so fast, says Amelia's computer. Gems can be very useful, but they're not the answer to every problem. Every gem you add to the gem file might have dependencies on other gems. Those might have dependencies on other gems, and those, in turn, have even more dependencies. All of those dependencies can cause complications and eventually make it harder to upgrade your project. Oh no, I don't want that. I heard Rails 5 is coming out soon, and I'll definitely want to use turbo links. That's not a joke, cried Amelia. I guess I should make sure the gems I'm including are the ones I'll really need. Amelia is working as an intern at a software development company. The client she works with, Business Corporation, Inc., requests that new parameters be added for customer addresses. Parameters, Amelia thinks. I know exactly what to do with params in a Rails app. Perfect. She does exactly what they ask for and add them to the params hash. They'll be so excited. This one's a bit cultural, but I had already printed the book. Hash is like a dish with potatoes and onions and sometimes peppers, and in this case, customer address parameters. So you should try it if you see it on a menu. Whoops, says Amelia's computer. A client can say parameters, which seems like a general term, but that word has more meaning in a Rails project. It turns out what the client really needs is just a new table column to save records to. Well, at least my workplace has code review, so the mistake is caught and corrected before being deployed, says Amelia. Hey, don't be so hard on yourself, Amelia. This is a great opportunity for you to push back on a client request in the future when they seem off to you. And you were able to teach a semi-technical client a little bit about Rails architecture in the process. Yeah, I guess you're right. Nothing bad happened, and I learned something. I guess I am getting the hang of this. Amelia is coaching for the first time at a Rails workshop. She finally knows enough to feel comfortable coaching and helping others learn to code. She overhears a group talking about scheduling tasks for an add-on to the workshop's base project. They want to use a time field for this, but everything falls apart when they try to schedule dates very, very far into the future. Amelia's worked with future dates before and made this very same mistake before too. She heads right over and explains, hey, I've had that problem before too. It's an easy enough mistake to make, but if you use date time instead, you won't have a problem. That's why I always use date time whenever I need dates. So that alludes to an earlier slide, but they'll be online, so it will make sense. That's not even the silliest mistake I've made yet. I'm still making mistakes every day, and that's okay, because making mistakes means that I'm learning. Even if it feels like I'm learning things the hard way, I know a lot more about why things work the way that they do. Plus, sometimes my mistakes help someone else learn too. When we talk about why it happened, I can help them learn better. Maybe they try to edit the database schema because they've worked with Access before, and I can help them by pointing out the analogous parts of Active Record in a Rails application. I think, though, that's what software development is about, making a lot of mistakes and learning from them. So that's a pretty nice story, right? Amelia wanted to learn to code, and she did, and then everything is wrapped up neatly with a bow and a date time cake at the end. But this is just one Amelia Bedelia story. So when you just see one story like this, it's really easy to think that our journeys as software developers it was difficult, and I struggled for a while, and then I achieved what I wanted to achieve, and now everything's great. And I think it's easy to frame our story that way, and I think a lot of beginner developers see our stories framed that way, and I've framed my story that way before too. But in truth, it's much more like this. It's like a wavy sine wave thing. Sometimes you're at the peak, and you are the master of all computers, and all electronics bow down before your awesome power. And other days, you're kind of in this trough where you're just doing really silly stuff. You're doing rake server and Rails routes, and you feel like Amelia Bedelia. You never really stop making mistakes. I'm still new to Ruby, and I certainly haven't stopped making mistakes. Recently, for me, I was working with a developer at my company, at Big Nerd Ranch, who's much more senior than me, and I have always looked up to him, and I've always thought he just knew everything. So we were working together, trying to wrap a test, a spec, around kind of like a hairy edge case feature. And an important part of this feature was that something happened at a very specific time. And in our concentration, we tried to force equality on two separate instances of time.now, and we found that they weren't equal. And this was shocking. This was amazing to us. We thought that we found a bug in Ruby, and so we raced off to the company chat room, and we're like, alert Twitter, call Koichi, tell them we found a bug in Ruby. And we told everyone on our team, we were like, hey, check this out. Time.now equals time.now returns false. What's up with that, right? And the other members of our team who weren't elbows deep in this issue were like, yeah, that looks right. What's the problem here? And it was in that moment we realized we made a pretty big mistake, and we felt pretty silly. But the place that we work, it's really safe to make mistakes, and it's safe to do silly things like that. And no one got hurt. We just briefly forgot how time works. And I think that happens to developers sometimes. These things happen. I'm sure you've seen time errors on the web or in various applications or just in your life. So we made that mistake. I make a lot of mistakes. Beginner developers make a lot of mistakes. You always catch them editing the schema because it seems like that's the single source of truth on the database, so they'll just make a change in there and it will be fine. And later they look back on their mistakes and they say, wow, I can't believe I did that. But it's okay for them to make mistakes because we all make mistakes. What beginner developers don't realize, though, is that advanced developers make a lot of mistakes. Advanced developers are always doing things like spamming the entire customer email list by accident, deleting important records from prod, and taking servers offline. That's not great, but that's okay too, that advanced developers make mistakes, because we do things like have customer service who helps us and saves us from these public-facing gaffes. Sorry? Oh, sorry. I don't know. I thought someone in the audience was telling me something, and I need to address it right now. Sorry. New speaker. Sorry. And so we have things like customer service who help us with the more public-facing gaffes. We have things like database backups. If you don't have database backups, like, please back up your databases right now. Please. I don't care if you have to leave. That's fine. But the biggest mistake that advanced developers make is not talking about their mistakes. Until I was working with this coworker, I call him a colleague, but like I look up to this person so much. And until we were working on this, and we both kind of like semi-publicly in our work chat room embarrassed ourselves, I thought he was infallible. I'd never seen him a mistake. And one thing that he told me was that he's probably making a lot of mistakes, but he was just typing too fast that I couldn't pick up on them. So what's important is that we share our mistakes and we talk about our mistakes. I'm still pretty new, but when I meet people who are newer than me and I help them learn about Ruby and Rails, I let them know, like, hey, oh, I have done that before. Don't worry. Don't feel dumb. A lot of people make that mistake. Because the truth is, you never really stop making mistakes. Making mistakes is good because you look back on what you did before and you say, gosh, what jerk wrote that? And it was you. And you say, who would ever write such a thing? But so now, present you knows better than past you, so you've learned something. And the biggest thing that you should think about making mistakes is that a place that's safe to make mistakes is a place that's safe to learn. So this is really the end.
Thank you, Kylie. We do have a couple minutes for questions if anybody has any questions.
That ran very short, sorry.
It's totally okay. No one gets mad when the person before lunch runs short. No one gets mad.
Lunchtime, everyone go.
So anybody, there's a question right here.
Yeah, so I think you already answered that in Berlin, but is there a slight chance that this book will ever be published?
I have good news. I printed this copy. It's riddled with spelling errors. I am cleaning up the PDF, and I will put it online and give instructions how you can go print your own copy of this book. I'm not going to sell it, so you will just be paying the printing cost from the company that prints it, and you'll have to upload the PDF yourself, unfortunately. I love Peggy and Herman Parrish. I loved these books as a child, so I don't want to kind of like make money off of their work. So I will put the PDF online, and instructions will be on my personal site, which is kyfast, kyfast.net, hopefully in the coming week. So if you want a copy, you can print it yourself.
I have a question, actually. Towards the end, you talked about advanced developers and how advanced developers make mistakes. Do you think that part of the reason why sometimes advanced developers make those mistakes is because junior developers or new developers kind of have the open-eyed view and they try to keep things as simple as possible, whereas advanced developers can sometimes overcomplicate code needlessly?
I think that's very possible. Yes, I think that is a quick way to make a mistake. If you want to show everyone on your team that you're human and you make mistakes, you should quickly write complex, clever code. But yeah, I think that is one of the sources.
All right, so here's the plan. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you.